Thank you for everything. All right. All right. Hey there, folks. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're a little bit early, but since we have 3 awesome panelists, I wanted to be able to take as much time to let them share their stories. This first session that I'm starting off is going to be a session about failures. It's one of those things that most people don't like to talk about. It's pretty taboo, but organizations who have learned that actually failures are really a great opportunity for growth and learning, like I said. Some of them do regular failure sessions in their team meetings. Netflix have an entire function focused on blameless learning from failure to create more resilient engineering organizations. So I think this is a really great session. I think the folks that are here with me have a lot of mileage in the industry and can really help us understand why it's important to learn from failure, how to learn from failure, especially in a blameless way. So I'm going to introduce them quickly, and then we can go right into the stories, and then afterwards we'll have a quick Q&A session, see what we take away from these stories. So we're going to start off with Anna. Anna in Tsibulskaya is a infrastructure and security engineer at Forwarder these days, which was previously at Wix. As a production engineer. She also has a super cool blog on Medium about incident management that you'll want to follow. And Anna's going to share a story about an apparent widespread phishing attack and how they handled it at her previous organization.
Hi.
Wait, hang on. Oh, sorry. How do I give you the main screen? Give me a second. There.
Hi. Good morning, good night, everyone. So my story today is about what we thought was a phishing attempt, but apparently it wasn't. It was a funny story because it started as a security issue. We saw that on some of the websites we had during loading, we were showing a phishing image. Basically, it was a very strange image with different call to action buttons. And if you check source code, you could see that it had a link. And of course, we didn't want to show that image, and we didn't know where it started to be shown. So we thought that we got hacked. And the issue wasn't reproducible in 100% of the cases, and it wasn't on every website. It was just some part of a website and on just few refreshes. So we thought, okay, probably we got hacked not on all our servers, but on some part of it. But still, it's a pretty scary situation when you think that that you're hacked. So we started investigating an issue, and while our security team was checking all the audit logs and if there was some suspicious activity or anything like that, I started checking business analytics and just tried to see where the image came from and who uploaded it and where, because we had some legit flows of users being able to upload pictures, but of course we didn't want to show that pictures as loaders. So what I saw was that the image was uploaded by a user, and that user didn't do anything specific, like anything illegal. All the actions were just fine. Image was uploaded correctly through a normal flow, and nothing serious. And security team also didn't find anything. Audit log was clean, no suspicious activity, nothing. And at that point, we realized that it's probably not a security issue and we didn't get hacked, we just have a bug. But that was even more scary because we had to debug it somehow. And when you cannot reproduce the issue 100% and it's a very strange issue, you don't even know how to start debugging. So first idea I had was just to check change log and check all the changes related to that area of websites, but only in between time when the picture was uploaded and when the picture was started showing in loading. And apparently the changelog was huge. So I said, okay, let's try to take a different approach. And I started thinking, okay, if we cannot reproduce it 100% of times, let's try to find a way to reproduce it. Usually, you just write down all the possible differences between cases when you can reproduce and you cannot reproduce, and start eliminating differences just to try to reproduce 100% of the times. Differences, the list of differences was also huge. Basically, it's a web application, so everything can be a difference. Browser, screen resolution, server which rendered the website, and a lot of possible things. But we took that approach, so our QA team started testing all the possible cases, and they spent, I think, a full day trying to reproduce it 100% of the cases. We got closer to 100, but of course not 100, which was already a bit better. So when we could reproduce it in most of the cases, I started just raising a request and trying to see the whole flow, where the request goes, what the server-side service responds to it, where the pictures are taken from, and so on and so on. And the flow was clean. Like, I came to see logs from a server-side application, and it was all okay. And it was showing that for pictures, it's calling some specific URLs, and that URLs were fine. And it seemed like that picture is coming just out of nowhere. And at some point, we just hit a dead end, and I didn't know what to do else, because I can reproduce an issue and I can trace that specific request. And during the whole request, there is no place where this phishing image appears from. We tried just to mitigate an issue, clean cache, or just move traffic to a different data center. It mostly didn't help. So we decided to just wait a bit with it. Of course, customers were complaining, but it wasn't, we knew already that it's not a security issue, so we were pretty much kind of okay with it, as much as we could be. Next morning, one of the developers from that server-side application started calling my manager and said, listen, I know you will be angry, but I found out that URLs which we're writing in the logs that we're calling them, they're incorrect. We are actually writing one URL, but calling another one. As soon as we got a real URL which was called, we found out that basically we found where the picture is coming from. And we found out that instead of calling just a media server, we were calling another service, which was some backup locations for a CDN. And of course, because it's a static content only and it's a backup for a CDN, it was also caching everything. But we had a bug there. So in Nginx configuration, we started caching files just by path without taking into account the domain. And apparently at the same time, while developers were loading some loader for websites, some user loaded with the same path some phishing image. And that's it. That's basically how we got a phishing image as a loader. And as soon as we found out that logs were incorrect and basically it's a different URL, we had like 3 minutes up to the fix because it was super easy to find out what went wrong in that case.
Wow, that sounds like a stressful story. How long did this whole thing take?
I think something like 35, 36 hours in total.
And was it like an incident? Were you on call the whole time?
No, after we hit a dead end, we basically went to sleep because we needed it. But before that, yeah, I think we worked like first 24 hours in a row and then had some break. And then when we found out what happened, it was just a few minutes of fix.
Are you able to laugh about it at least a little now, or is it still traumatic?
No, not traumatic at all. It's just a standard incident, and I think it's pretty funny.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm going to ask more questions later. I'm going to bring in our next panelist, and that's going to be Or Cohen. Welcome, Or. Let's make sure you're unmuted. Hey. So Or Cohen is certainly an industry veteran. He spoke at the very first DevOps Con before we became DevOps Day in Tel Aviv in 2013. So he's been quite around. And he is now a tech lead at a company called Melio Payments. Before that, he was one of the leading consultants in Israel around DevOps and operations. And he's going to tell us a funny story where it's actually surprising to think about the different functions in the chain who can actually create some chaos as well. So go right ahead.
Sorry. So thank you, Sharone. I'm really happy to join and share my story. So I was going to tell how about at Melio, what we do. We're a B2B payments product with the goal of helping small business stay in business. So I was going to tell about how we lost our entire database, but it wasn't at Melio. It was at a different company long ago, about a decade ago. So I have a more recent story that happened to us at Melio. So essentially, we're all about payments, okay? We allow our users, business users, basically, pay with any payment method and have their vendors still getting checks like they always used to. So, when we went live with Melio, was a little bit over a year ago. We had a very low deposit rate of the checks that we sent. So essentially, we're sending out checks to our to the vendors of our users, and only about 70% of the checks were deposited. So at first we thought that they were somehow lost in the mail, but 30% of lost envelopes or lost anything in mail is it's a little bit too much. If it was 5% or something like that, it would be okay, but 30% was a little over the top, a lot over the top. So we were still pretty small, and we had ways to mitigate such problems. But so it wasn't really a huge issue, but it was an issue that we actually needed to solve because some payments were late, some we needed to reimburse our own. We started, so we needed to reimburse our own clients. So we reached out to a few of the vendors and started to investigate why this might have happened. And there were two main points, two main problems that caused this that we didn't even think one of them was actually a bug, but the other didn't even occur to us that it might be a problem. So the first problem was that the envelopes that we sent, they were branded Melio. They were purple. So the people getting the envelopes in the mail, they thought it was advertising. So they didn't even open the envelope. They just threw it in the trash. So that was one issue with that. And we changed the envelopes to be like a more like a white envelope, what you would expect from when you get a check in the mail or something similar. So that solved like a huge proportion of the problematic checks. And the other issue was in the zip code. A few of the checks that weren't supposed to get to their destination got to their destination somehow, I guess from the address. And we received the image of like a picture of the envelope from these vendors. So we had like a session. We tried to view why these there was a wrong zip code on these envelopes. So we listed a bunch of these. And we looked at the zip codes, and it was just a number that didn't even exist in our system. It was like, I don't know, like a 5-digit number, like a zip code, that didn't even exist. So initially, we thought like data mix-up in some of these payments or these addresses. So these numbers didn't exist at all. So what we did, I listed the bunch of wrong zip codes, and I listed the real zip code that were supposed to be on the envelope. And I gazed at this list. And I don't know if you know the US zip codes. It's structured, it's 5 digits, and then a dash, and then 4 digits. So after, I don't know, a few minutes of me gazing at the numbers, I realized the actual zip code that was supposed to be sent, like 5-digit dash 4 digits, it was actually close numerically to the error, like the wrong zip code that was used. And then I just did the math calculation of the 5 digits minus the 4 digits, and was actually the wrong zip code that was actually sent. So essentially, this wasn't like this, and then we found the problem. It's like it was like a Sherlock moment or something. So it wasn't a problem on our end, because we used a service, like a banking service that sends the checks for us. So we just contacted them and told them, listen, there's like a big problem. You're using the wrong zip code, not what we send you. And then they were quick to fix, and everything was back on track. But again, it was there was the two problems, like colored envelopes, which affect the deposit rate of checks, and a funny bug, in the system.
It's really funny because sometimes you forget that there are also humans in the process, right? As engineers, so we always try to engineer the problem. We're like, okay, let me find the number in the logs. Let me try and see where the actual issue is. We have an error in the database, but eventually there are people in the process too, and they make all kinds of decisions, like throwing away envelopes or populating it into a spreadsheet and and triggering some kind of a formula or something that we wouldn't actually think of as engineers. So I think that's a really great story that reminds us about the human factor. I'm going to move on to our next person. At the end, we're going to have some Q&A. So welcome, Adi. Let's make sure you're unmuted. Hey. Okay, so Adi, aside from being also an industry veteran, R&D group leader at AppsFlyer, is a colleague and friend, and he's going to tell us about a gripping tale of stress and how we came back from the brink of potential disaster. So take it away, Adi.
Hey, hi everyone. So story is actually not a failure, it was like almost a failure. Happened almost exactly 2 years ago. We were migrating one of our most mission critical services at AppsFlyer to a newer system that we spent almost a year building from a legacy system, and we were already live. We had we were migrating the customers one by one, and we had like almost 10% of our customers already in the new system. One of the key components of this new system was a huge Aerospike cluster. Aerospike is a key value database that we use, and it had a very important state for this process, for the system, basically holding critical data for us for every installation that AppsFlyer measures. And it took us to have the two flows running side by side. We had to pre-populate the state and the new database, and it took us almost 2 months of very hard work and a lot of money to populate the state there. We basically ran or replayed 2 years of AppsFlyer traffic into this database, and at this point it had 72 billion records in it of all sorts and kinds. It's a conceptually one cluster. It was made up from 4 different clusters, but it was logically one cluster. We were thinking everything was really going smoothly. We had, as I said, 10% of the traffic already running there. And then one night I'm sitting at home, I'm looking at some dashboards, just making sure everything is going smoothly. And then I find out that we had a bug, and we were not renewing the TTLs on this Aerospike. So we had a TTL on every record that we put in there, because we knew that a lot of the history we put in there was basically garbage, and we wanted it to go away. but we want like the active users and the active devices to still be there after we see them. We had like a 60-day TTL that we put in there. We initially wanted to put 90 days in there, but that was the first problem that I listened to my boss, and he convinced me to put a shorter TTL to save some money in there. So we had a bug. We were not renewing TTLs, and then immediately where I was like very worried. I said, okay, now we're in the really deep problem. And we found out, we did some investigation. We found out we have like a week time before basically all of the data in this database that we worked so hard to put in there is going to just disappear if we don't do anything. So immediately we started to investigate and find the best way to solve this problem. The only solution we came up with that made any sense was basically to scan the whole database. And let me remind you, there were like 72 billion records in these clusters that we needed to go over and touch one by one. So immediately, me and Nir Rubinstein, which is our chief architect at AppsFire, we started looking into every sort of solution we can find, and the solution was we needed to write a Lua script that was going to run as a UDF, a user-defined function on each Aerospike node, and basically go over one by one and update the TTL on the records, the time to live. At this point, we had like 6 days left before the data is going to disappear, is going to be expired. We started running the scan. It was looking good. It was I don't know, 7, 8 in the evening when it started, and then and I was on call. I took the PagerDuty shift, and then everything started ringing at like 3 in the morning. The scan was misconfigured. It had a bug in it, and we also had some misconfiguration the Aerospike clusters in terms of memory location. So basically, at 3 in the morning, we lost one of the databases. As I said, it was comprised of like 4 different databases. We lost one. We had to stop the scan. We had to rebuild it, the other cluster, before we could restart the scan. We basically started the scan again with like 3 days left. It took a little bit over 3 days to scan the whole data, but it was like really like a MacGyver episode. It was like we saved it with like the tech industry equivalent of duct tape, toothpaste, and I don't know, some rope. And we basically managed to save all of it. We like touched 99.8% of the data in the databases, and it was nothing short of a miracle. So there was a lot of like smart people involved, or wise people involved, that were quick to respond and worked very hard to manage the situation. But there was an enormous amount of luck here. So conclusion is, don't listen to your boss about shorter TTLs, and check every metric you can with like 50 times.
So this is also a stressful database story. I didn't let Ol tell his story only because it was so tragic that we wanted some comic relief in this fun session. But it's amazing how sometimes like the failures, the cascading failures, are a second before production. So there's also stories where that's actually a big part of it, right? Being able to manage the incident properly enough in order to not get to that place where you actually fail and have production damage. So I'm going to bring the rest of our folks back into the stream, and now we're just going to ask a few questions. So, failures, everybody fails, right? I'm going to go one by one. I'll call out, I see we do have some questions. So let's start with the questions from the crowd. What advice would you guys give to others based on what you learned? How to take the growth and learning from these types of experiences. So we'll start from the top. Adi.
So I think, and what I I try to teach engineers at Upstart is that failures are the places where we learn the most. We learn from our successes, but we learn more from our failures. So, as you said at the start of the session, on each like failure, production issue, something that went wrong, do a post-mortem, understand what you did right, what you did wrong, don't blame anyone, make the environment safe for everybody to tell to say speak what they think, and feel like everything's okay, even though we may have caused some business disruption or whatever. It's the only way to grow and learn.
What do you think, Anna?
Hey. I think there are two the most important points in the story I shared. First one is try to always mitigate your incident first without going deep into debugging or fixing it, because you will just save time and users won't be seeing your problem while you're still debugging it. And the second important point is that when you're making any change, try to check that it's not a huge heap of changes and you're just throwing one more into it. It would have been so much easier if we saw that at the time of at the time frame we were checking, there was just one specific change which we can easily roll back and just test without the change and see that everything is fine. But because there were tons of changes, it was just impossible.
So isolating the changes is an important factor so that, you don't have like cascading failures. It's true. And what are your thoughts?
There are many things. If I can pick one, I would definitely say that when you build a system, like failures are bound to happen at some point, at some point or another in the life of a company, in the life of a system. So when you're building the system and building the company, try to not over-engineer things like on purpose. Try to be as simple as possible as you can, because when the failures will happen, from my experience, most of the time it's gonna be. From my experience, most of the time it's going to be easier to debug or to find the issue if the system is simpler. If it's complex, it's going to make your life harder when stuff hits the fan.
And how did these incidents make you feel after you managed the incident and everything was under control? Did you stop? Did you feel guilty about how you managed the incident? Did you do a retrospective on your management of the of what happened? Let's start with Anna.
No, I didn't feel any guilty. I think that's a completely destructive feeling, especially for production incidents. I completely agree with Or and Adi that issues in production happens. It's just part of work and nothing to feel guilty about. And I don't know, after every production fix, this specific one or any other, I feel relief. And I'm usually trying to organize a story in a nice and funny way so more people read about it and learn something from it, and just trying not to have it in the future once again.
Yep. Adi.
So I didn't feel guilty. I felt responsible because I was actually responsible for that project. But I don't think guilt is a healthy feeling here. We did feel super relieved when we were like saved by the bell, and we probably drank some whiskey at the office as we usually do at such cases. But no guilt.
Yeah, I think guilt is a strong word, but yeah, I mean, definitely the responsibility is an important thing. What are your thoughts? How do you feel after such incidents?
Well, it depends. Sometimes I feel guilty. It depends if I created it or not, but it's a it's a feeling that kind of keeping to myself and not blaming anyone else when this stuff happens. But yeah, in terms of my story, as I guess the responsibility there is the problem there was that once the data left the digital world and became like a physical entity, like a check that actually being sent on the mail, it's kind of hard to track. So if I can use the term guilt, our guilt there is that we could probably have tried to come up with a better monitoring system for this type of thing, but we were so small that we couldn't even. We were just starting, so it was a bit of a problem.
How do you monitor things like that are physical? Like, I mean, that's then if I can ask.
It's in terms of the checks, we then used like when the checks were actually deposited on the other end by the vendors. So we then started writing which of the checks that we sent weren't deposited, like in the system itself. Initially, we just started out simple, and we just sent out the checks, and manually we didn't have a lot of payments, so we had like our payment operations team like manually went payment by payment and see what was deposited and what wasn't. So that's the first option now. The product has evolved since, so we have better ways now.
And one more question. I actually have another question at the end after this one, but did a similar issue, or did this happen again, or a similar issue happen again? And did you? I guess my second half of this question is: did you think back to the previous incident and take learnings from it and know how to manage it better this time around? Start with Adi.
So no, not the same issue. We have had a lot of database issues as our traffic grows and the scale like exploded at times. I think we learned a lot from each of these sessions, and we configure the clusters better, and we know more and more, and we find out more metrics that are important for us, and we learn to control processes better. But it didn't happen again, no.
Okay. Anna?
No, nothing similar as far as I remember appeared again. But in general, it's pretty common type of issues with a lot of changes at the same time. So that apparently continued to be an issue. But I think with a good monitoring, you can eliminate it partially. And no, I think that issue didn't happen again.
Okay. And go right ahead.
Actually, we almost had a similar issue, specifically with the checks. Again, this translation from digital to physical is it's not something we engineers are kind of used to. So we almost ran out of envelopes. So initially we bought like a pack of, I don't know, a few thousand envelopes, and we almost ran out. Luckily, the bank notified us, like, look, like you're at the bottom of the pack here. And so we added a monitor, it's like a disk space monitor. It just monitors the amount of checks that we send versus the amount that we know that are in the pile. It's like a stupid simple ERP system for envelopes. Yeah. So it almost happened, but yeah, it didn't.
Sometimes we have to think low tech too. All right, we have last couple minutes. So I just want each of you to just briefly give me one short, piece of advice to junior engineers, or even, seasoned engineers going through a failure, or who have experienced failure. Something that you would say to them. This is the advice I can give you from my years of, being through it, how to handle it in real time, and how to take the best learnings from these experiences. So we'll start with you, Or.
Okay, so the first thing that I kind of put my mind into when there's a certain failure is that you need to be persistent with your, like, you're trying to find something in the system, like you're trying to find where the failure is. So don't give up. Like, be persistent. First have an assumption of what might cause it, and then try to I forgot the word. Try to negate the assumption. Like, try to look, okay, if this were to happen, if this assumption were true, can I see it somewhere else in the system? And this is this can be a tedious process, but when you actually find a problem this way, like in a certain methodological way, you'll get to the real actual issue without just throwing solutions at the system. Like, yeah, so the main thing you try to avoid is to just throw stuff at the system and hoping that something works.
Okay. Anna.
I completely agree with Zor about having a methodology. I think that's a super important thing. And I met some people that were thinking that methodology is slow, that you can fix issue faster with just starting to fix something. But it never actually worked. So I think the main advice I would give is try to mitigate first, as I said. And more than that, when you're doing any change to the system, think of how would you mitigate it in case stuff hits the fan, quoting or. Because I think, yeah, as soon as you mitigated it for user, you have more time to start debugging methodologically and find the final issue.
Awesome. And wrap it up, Adi. Take it away.
So both O and Anna, very valid points. I would add, like, that if something fails, like, try not to stress, take a deep breath. Usually start from looking at relevant code changes, because most of the breakages are from code changes. So if you don't have like a clear log of what changes were made into production system, create one. It will help you a lot. But other points are very valid. Methodology and understanding the real root cause is very important.
Thank you all so much for an excellent session, for sharing from your experience and enabling folks to understand how to take the growth and learning from these experiences. You've been very brave. I appreciate your joining us today. Thank you so much. And let's keep donating and make sure that we get as much research out of this project. So feel free to donate because all the proceeds are going to charity. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.